To say that control has no place in therapy is pretty much to invite incredulity. We straight away equate not controlling with being a doormat, with being passive in such a way that we just let things happen. And in a goal-orientated society, that's the worst thing. It's like you're a fish floating upside down, belly up in the pond at this stage. If you're not at least trying to control, then you are a dead fish. There's no positive side to this at all, as far as we can see it. But this is, if only we could see it, we could see that this is an utterly bizarre thing to assert. Seeing as control is nothing more than us trying to get our own way, and we don't know what the right way is anyway. So if we do try and get our own way, we're just fulfilling our delusions, or trying to fulfill our delusions. Controls takes for granted the fact that I know that where I am is wrong and that where I want to be is right. We can't ever say that because we don't know what's wrong, we don't know what's right, we don't know anything. That's complete hubris to say that. We absolutely haven't a clue. The only thing we can say about control is that it offers us a form of security. It offers us a type of security because we feel that we can stop the bad thing happening, whatever that is. So the power that we have in control is essentially the power to block change. By saying I only want change on my terms, I only want change when it is what I want it to be, I'm actually blocking change because change is never on our terms. The self, or the ego, is a type of machine for always seeking the advantage, we could say. It can't not seek its own advantage because it's a machine for seeking the advantage. It can't not do what it is. So to say that somehow for the self or ego to be always seeking its advantage can produce, as a result, mental health, mental well-being, is absolutely crazy. Because mental health, mental well-being comes about as a result of the exact antithesis of this. It's when the ego stops trying to assert itself, when the ego stops trying to control, when the ego stops trying to get the advantage that it wants. It's letting go. So mental health comes from letting go, not from good controlling. When we control, we are a machine. We're a machine because we're closed to new ways of looking at the world. And we're a machine because we can just keep on doing the same old thing over and over again in the hope that it will result in something different. So the self keeps on trying to assert itself because it thinks if it does this successfully enough, it will lead to a situation where it will be happy and everything will be fine. But it doesn't, because the self or the ego is the cause of the problems in the first place, and it always has been. Always has been. So the only thing we know is how to keep on doing this same thing over and over again. So that the life of the mechanical identity is appallingly repetitive, and it never ever gets anywhere. It never ever goes anywhere because that mechanical identity is always just asserting itself and reasserting itself. So it's like we start with a basic template, and that template gets copied. So our purposeful activity is copying a template. Our purposes are the template. The template is in us, and we're trying to actualize what is in us, the idea that we have in us. So copying is the name of the game. Copying is sterile. To copy the same thing over and over again is a redundant thing. We all know that. We know that originality and creativity is the thing, not copying, and yet the life of that rational ego is copying and nothing else forever and ever and ever. And the unspoken assumption is that if we copy successfully enough, with enough fidelity to the original, and if we are strong enough or skilled enough to prevent anything getting in the way of this copying process, to get very, very angry if anything gets in the way of the copying process. So if we're good enough at it controlling, we can stop it getting in the way. And the unspoken assumption is that somehow this copy of the template will be equal in some way to a great act of creativity, a great act of originality, which is what being free is. Free, we don't become free by copying, and when we are free, it's a great revolution. It is a truly original act, so we can look at what everyone else is doing and try and do what they're doing better, which is what society is all about. Nowhere is this about becoming free, even though it has the name that we are trying to find freedom, we're trying to find realization, we're trying to find happiness, fulfillment, being free from the things that we don't want. It's nothing to do with freedom, because you can't become free by copying, because you're always a slave to the template. That's what you are. That's what it is to be the conditioned self. The rational ego is to be a slave to the template. The template isn't us. It's not real. So neither is it real on the one hand, and it's not us either. And yet we're slaves to copying it. That is the situation exactly in conditioned existence. That's what we're at. Nowhere, anywhere will we see someone doing otherwise in society other than trying to copy out the template. The template may vary, the ideas and beliefs may vary, but the basic activity is who can copy out the template the best, and my template is better than your template. It's impossible to become free from looking outside and seeing what other people are doing. And it's impossible to become free by looking at what we're doing, or looking at ourselves and ideas and trying to enact them. The only way to become free is via this act of total rebellion, like Krishnamurti says, where we rebel against all patterns instead of enacting them, instead of copying them out over and over again, like some kind of dumb idiot. What are you doing? I'm copying out the pattern that I've always copied out. Oh, okay. Or instead of saying like some kind of dumb idiot, we could say like a machine. That's what machines do. A toaster will always toast. A waffle maker will always make waffles. A hoover will always hoover. And so on and so forth. And the self or ego will always copy itself. Copy it over and over again, because that's what it means to be a self. It means to copy yourself over and over and over again, to extend yourself forever and ever, and never let anything happen to get in the way of that. So this is the life of the rational ego, to extend itself indefinitely and to fight against change for all it's worth. It isn't a normal way of looking at ourselves and how we normally are, but it is the accurate way, the true way, which has got to be worth something. So we have all these ways of looking at ourselves, kind of glamorizing ourselves or whatever. And there's the true way of looking at ourselves and what we do, which is that it's basically that there is this virus in us that's just busy copying itself out, busy doing virus type stuff. And a virus doesn't have any choice. Like a virus, a biological virus, rather than any other type of virus, is a thing that has a particular pattern, and it just wants to spread this pattern throughout the whole world. Not that it wants to, but there's a machine for doing that, because it can't do anything else. A virus can't do anything else apart from reproduce the original template, the RNA or the DNA that's in it. So we can understand that. But it's not so easy to understand that that's what we do, because we always think we're striving for something else. We think we're striving for great results, for progress. But all the great results that we want to achieve, all the progress that we want to achieve, comes down to great results for the ego construct, great results for the fixed and unchanging pattern that I've identified with, or progress for this fixed idea that I have of myself. So progress is great. You can think of all the progressive type activity going on, and we can kind of warm our hands over it and say, lovely progress, lovely progress. But it's progress for the static identity, which is crazy. How can a static identity progress? It can't. It can only copy itself out, and that isn't progress. It's just a redundant action. It's not progress at all. What we really mean by progress, if we could see it, or what we really mean by self-improvement, is for us to get better at getting our own way, for us to get better at copying out the template. So we can get better at copying out the template. We can get better at the game and making sure that only our voice gets heard, only our way of seeing things gets listened to, which is, of course, what we do anyway. We try to be better. That's called competitiveness. We compete with all the other mechanical egos. But that isn't change. The only type of change it is upside down change, or the reciprocal of change, which is we're changing in the sense that we're getting better at not changing. So that's what progress means. That's what self-improvement means. So once we see this, control becomes, it's less easy to believe in control as the answer to all our questions, to all our problems. But all the same, we will come back and say, well, supposing I do have whatever mental health issues, are you trying to say that not controlling will help me? Suppose I've got anxiety and I just say, well, let the anxiety just carry on. Just let it carry on as it will carry on. How's that going to help me? If I'm depressed, if I just let the depression carry on, how's that going to help me, etc., etc.? Because we have the sensation when we're anxious, for example, that if we don't keep striving to keep the bad thing at bay, the bad thing will happen. So we're actually poised on the edge of a kind of a hole or a crevice that we could fall into. So we have to control all the time to stop falling into this hole, to stop falling into this crevice. And the same thing is true with depression. If I'm suffering from depression, it's entirely likely that I'll have the impression that I have to fight the depression, to combat it, to stop it getting worse and sucking me down a black hole. This is conventional wisdom. on the matter. Only it isn't wisdom at all. It's upside down wisdom. It's the reciprocal, the inverted form of wisdom. It's absolute foolishness, which we understand to be the right way, the right thing to do. The problem in understanding this comes about because if I am suffering from anxiety, just to stick with this example rather than overcomplicating things, then it really does seem that the anxiety has a life of its own and the anxious thoughts are happening all by themselves. So if I sit back like a doormat, they're just going to walk over me. The anxious thoughts are going to walk over me all the same, even more, 10 times as much. They're going to walk through crap on the street and then wipe their shoes on me, these anxious thoughts. Life's going to get even worse. So that kind of reaffirms the idea that you mustn't ever stop controlling no matter what. But the point is that the anxious thoughts and this big wheel of anxiety, the machine of anxiety, that is our controlling. That's got us a control. So even if I put my hands up and say, oh, I can't control anymore, I'm just going to see what the anxiety does. That anxiety is my controlling. All the energy that is in it is the energy of my controlling built up over years and years. Only it's developed a life of its own. This mass of controlling has swallowed up my whole life, and it's become a big thing, and it's become the enemy, but it's my controlling that's just got away from me and now seems like something else. I can't stop it because this controlling, that is the anxiety, or the attempt to control rather, is its own boss. It's its own you could say it's like a servant I used to have, even though it's not kind of, we don't normally have servants these days, but it's like a servant or a tool that I used to have that's now become autonomous and does its own thing and doesn't listen to me when I say, hey, stop that, in a kind of weak and tremulous voice. Hey, stop that. All my strength has gone. I've given it away to this instrument, to this tool, to this servant. The servant or the instrument or the tool is huge and powerful. And now I'm a tiny little thing just standing there, just ineffectually trying to wonder, how do I manage this anxiety? What do I do? During everyday life, even when we're not controlling, we are. And so we can't actually stop controlling. We think it's easy, but it isn't. Because the under the surface controlling is happening all the time, and it's massive. That's where it's like the iceberg type thing. You can't see it, but it's massive. And what this controlling is about perpetuating a particular way of looking at the world, looking at things that I'm saying is the right way. The only way, the right way and the only way, the two go together. If it's the only way, it's got to be the right way. And this viewpoint is very important because it's this viewpoint that gives rise to the perception of, or to the experience of, being this concrete self. So when we talk about the self, we're really talking about an exclusive viewpoint, which is the only viewpoint. The ego can only look at things in its own way. That's what makes it the ego. It can't see another angle. So the controlling is necessary to maintain this concrete identity. We have to, it's like something that'll sink in a flash if I don't keep on. It's like a ship that'll sink unless I keep pumping out the water that's coming in and nailing in kind of patches to try and keep it afloat. It's an artificial thing. It's not real unless I work like hell the whole time, keeping it propped up, keeping it looking good. It's going to sink. It's an artificial thing. It's not sustained or supported by reality. It's sustained and supported by my deliberate efforts that I'm not aware of. So this control happens and I'm not aware of it. I can't be aware of it. I have to be unaware of it, otherwise the concrete identity can't exist. It can only exist if I don't know that I myself am producing it. As soon as I see that I myself am producing it, it's nothing. It's just my production, the thing I made. It's not who I am. It's who I pretend to be. When I see that it's who I pretend to be, I realize I can't help realizing that it's not who I am. There's a very big difference there. So the controlling that we don't know about is the controlling that has to do with maintaining this particular construct. And if we could just stop this, which is impossible just to stop it because it has a life of its own, if we could just stop this, then absolutely peace of mind would be the result. The end of anxiety would be the result. Of course it would be the result. There's no other reason to control other than to maintain this arbitrary artificial identity. This notion I have of myself, which is so very, very narrow and which is not who I am. But I'm not able to, it's not a practically realizable thing to stop the controlling. For start off, I don't understand that it's my controlling. I don't know that I am trying to control so as to perpetuate an unreal sense of identity. It's all just happening. And so there's no way I can not do it. There's absolutely no way that I can stop controlling. So in case someone were to say, okay, not controlling is far too easy, it's far too simplistic an approach to neurosis. What we need is something a bit more academic, a bit more intellectually heavyweight. Then that just shows how little we understand, because stopping controlling is not a small matter. It is, on the contrary, the most difficult thing that is, the most difficult thing that ever could be.